Welcome to the Relationships Decoding Podcast.
Ever get that feeling? Like someone you used to love, really love, just starts to totally bug you. And not just a little thing, but like a deep down, can't stand it kind of irritation.
Oh, yeah. It's way more common than people think, even in those relationships that look perfect from the outside.
Right. It's wild. Like my friend Jessica, she was telling me about this thing with her husband. They've been together 5 years, and she's just like totally repulsed.
5 years, wow. What was she saying specifically? Like, what were the signs?
So she was giving me these examples, and it's so clear. Like she won't even do laundry with him anymore, thinks his clothes are contaminated or something. Yeah. And then she said, whenever he comes home, like she could be in the best mood and boom, his key's in the door and she's just deflated.
I can feel that, like a total mood kill.
Totally. And she ignores his calls when she's out.
Yeah.
And like any kind of physical touch, forget it. She said holding hands felt repulsive.
Wow. Yeah, that's intense.
I know, right? And she was so lost. She's like, it doesn't matter what he does. I just find him annoying. Is this even normal?
That feeling of, I don't even know why I feel this way, is like a huge red flag.
Totally. And then it makes you wonder, right? Like, if you're feeling this toward your partner, are you just messed up? And if it's always a struggle, is breaking up the only option?
Right. Like, where do you even go from there?
Yeah, exactly. And if you do want to work it out, how do you even begin to fix something like that?
So that's what we're diving into today, this whole idea that maybe it's not just a lack of love, but something deeper.
Right, because our sources are pointing towards this idea of a trauma response.
Yeah, like all these little hurts building up over time in the relationship until it just explodes out as this huge, almost physical reaction.
Okay, so to understand this, we're going to get into some of the psychology behind it. And one of the first things our sources talk about is social exchange theory.
Yeah, social exchange theory. It's basically the idea that we all keep track of what we give and take in a relationship, like an emotional balance sheet.
Yeah. So like you put in effort and you kind of expect to get something back, something of equal value.
Exactly. And when that balance gets out of whack, like one person feels like they're always giving and not getting, that's when resentment starts to build up.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So what happens when someone feels like they're constantly putting in more than they're getting back?
Well, that's when you might start to see some emotional distancing, you know? Our sources talk about avoidance, resentment, even disdain as ways to try and create space.
It's like you're trying to protect yourself.
Exactly.
And thinking about Jessica's situation, the material we read gave a really good example of how this imbalance can play out in a marriage.
Oh, yeah, with the everyday stresses like buying a house, kids, money problems, all that can create a lot of tension.
Right. So in Jessica's case, her husband was the main breadwinner, and he would put down her role as a stay-at-home mom. Like he'd say stuff like, "You're home all day with a kid. How is that so tiring? Try my late nights and demanding clients."
Oof, that's harsh.
I know, right? Like completely dismissing her reality.
Yeah. And that's where the imbalance we talked about really comes in. Jessica's putting all this effort into the home and raising their child, but she's not feeling seen, not feeling appreciated. And so over time, that disappointment, it festers and turns into resentment.
It's like her efforts were totally invisible to him.
Exactly. And the research suggests that her feeling of disgust towards him, that physical aversion, that might actually be a defense mechanism, like her subconscious trying to protect her from even more hurt.
It's like her body's saying, nope, can't handle any more of this.
Yeah, and his coldness, that could be his own way of withdrawing, like a way to create distance, even if he doesn't realize he's doing it.
So it's not necessarily that the love just vanishes overnight. It's more like this slow erosion from feeling unappreciated and like you're not putting in the same amount of effort.
Exactly. And the piece made a really important point, which is that this aversion, it usually doesn't come from one big fight. It's all the small daily annoyances that add up.
Like the classic socks on the floor.
Exactly. But it's not really about the socks, right? They become symbols for all those bigger disappointments.
Okay, so we've got this idea of costs and rewards and how resentment can build up over time. But there are also some other things going on under the surface that contribute to feeling repulsed by your partner.
Right. Some deeper psychological stuff.
And our sources highlighted three main ones.
Yeah.
The first is this idea of a defense against losing autonomy.
Right. And this goes way back to childhood and how we learn to connect with people.
Attachment styles.
Yeah, exactly. The work of Margaret Mahler, she's a developmental psychologist, she showed how secure attachments in childhood lead to healthier adult relationships.
But that when kids experience a lot of abandonment or neglect, things can be different.
Right. They can develop this false sense of independence, like they learn to believe, I don't need anyone.
So even when they're in a relationship as adults, they still have that fear of becoming too dependent.
Exactly. And so they might subconsciously push their partner away. It's a way to maintain control, to keep that feeling of independence, even if it sabotages the relationship.
It's like they're protecting themselves from getting hurt again. What's the second one?
So the second one is about building a shield against emotional pain. Like if someone's been hurt over and over through criticism, neglect, their partner not being there for them emotionally, they start putting up walls.
So they shut down emotionally.
Yeah, it's a way to numb themselves, to protect themselves from more hurt. There was a quote in one of the sources that said, I've stopped expecting anything from them. I just don't care anymore.
Right. But the article pointed out that it's not really about not caring.
No, it's more like a survival strategy.
Because caring means being vulnerable, and that opens you up to getting hurt again.
Exactly.
And the third mechanism.
The third one is tied to attachment insecurity and being afraid of closeness.
Right, so this relates to that research by Art Aaron and his team about how we grow and change through our relationships.
Yeah, they found that in close relationships, people actually start to integrate parts of their partner's personality and habits into their own sense of self.
So you're almost becoming a blend of you and your partner.
Right. But for people who have anxious or avoidant attachment styles, that can feel really threatening.
So instead of seeing those differences as a good thing, they see them as an attack on who they are.
Yeah, like their partner's quirks are trying to take over. Like the article gave these examples. I hate that they snore. I want to sleep in separate rooms. Or they're too logical. I can't stand how they always try to explain things to me.
So those little things that might have been cued at the beginning of the relationship become unbearable.
Exactly. It's not really about the snoring or the explaining. It's about feeling like your own identity is being invaded.
Okay, so we've talked about why people start to feel this resentment and aversion. But what if you're in that situation and you want to stay in the relationship? What can you do?
Right, because Jessica, she loves her husband. She wants to fix this.
Yeah, and our sources had some really good advice for couples who are in this spot. The first one was pause active communication.
Yeah, which sounds kind of counterintuitive, right?
Because usually people say, talk it out, communicate.
Exactly. But when emotions are running super high, trying to talk things out can actually make it worse.
Like it just turns into a fight.
Yeah, so the first step is actually to take a break from trying to talk about it and focus on self-reflection.
So you need to figure out your own feelings first.
Exactly. And the source had some good questions to think about, like what specifically is it about my partner that's bugging me? And are there some old hurts from the past that are playing into this? And what needs of mine are not being met in the relationship?
Like really digging deep.
Yeah, you got to do that internal work first before you can even start to have a productive conversation with your partner.
Okay, so that's the first step.
Yep.
What's next?
The next one is called developing a friendship mindset.
A friendship mindset. What does that mean?
Well, the idea is that if the romantic spark has kind of fizzled out, you can intentionally try to treat your partner more like a roommate you get along with really well.
So taking the pressure off the romantic side of things.
Exactly. By focusing on the practicalities of life together and just being friends, you can sometimes create some breathing room and take the intensity down a notch.
Makes sense. And then there was a third strategy, and this one was about where you focus your energy.
Oh, yeah. This one was interesting. It talked about intentionally shifting your attention away from constantly dwelling on the negative stuff in the relationship and towards things that bring you joy and help you grow as a person.
So things like hobbies, your work, connecting with friends.
Exactly. That way, you're not letting the relationship's problems completely consume you.
So it's not about pretending the problems aren't there. It's about creating some balance in your life.
Exactly. And that can actually help you come back to the relationship with a fresh perspective.
Now, what about the other side of this? What if you're the one who's been hurting your partner?
Oh, yeah. The source had some advice for that, too.
Okay, good. What was the first step?
The first step is to be brutally honest with yourself. The piece asks this really tough question. Are you actually feeling guilty about your actions, or are you secretly getting some kind of satisfaction from controlling your partner?
Wow, that is a tough question.
It is, but it's crucial to figure that out because genuine remorse is like the foundation for being able to fix things. And if you do realize that you like having control, the source recommends therapy or mindfulness practices to help with that.
Because if it's about control, that's a whole other issue. But if you are genuinely remorseful, what are the next steps?
So if you're truly sorry, then the next step is to actively work on repairing the damage. And that starts with asking your partner about their needs, like really listening to what they have to say without getting defensive.
So understanding what you did wrong. And then what?
Then it's about making emotional bank account deposits.
Okay, what does that even mean?
It means showing your partner that you appreciate them and their feelings in big and small ways. It's about doing those little things that say, I value you.
So like the opposite of those little annoyances we talked about before.
Exactly. These are the little positive things that build trust and goodwill over time.
Right. Like showing up for them, being thoughtful. And then the article talked about apologies too, right?
Yeah, and it said that a quick sorry isn't enough. A real apology means saying what you did wrong, and even more importantly, explaining how you're going to change your behavior going forward.
So you're not just saying you'll be better, you're actually showing them how you'll be better.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, love should be a source of security and nourishment, not this constant battle.
That's such a good point.
Right.
It makes you think.
Yeah.
And all this leads to that final thought that our sources leave us with. I deserve a relationship that supports and uplifts me.
Ooh, I like that. So powerful because you do deserve that. And it makes you really think about what you expect from your relationships and what you're willing to accept. So if any of this resonated with you, even a little bit, if you saw yourself in Jessica's story or recognized it in someone you know, take some time to reflect. Ask yourself those questions. What are my triggers? Are there some deeper wounds at play here? And what needs of mine are not being met? And if you're the one who's been causing hurt, remember those questions about guilt versus control and how you can start making those emotional deposits. Because figuring out these underlying psychological dynamics is the first step to having a healthier, happier relationship.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that's it for today's deep dive. Until next time.
See ya.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and see you next time.